When you stand in the cold out there and you get that grouse to flush and that falcon's coming and he's coming and he's still coming, and it takes, a good quarter mile for that grouse to be out there for that falcon to come down from 1,800 feet. And now you see this big, giant, explosive, feather, and just the whole thing, and the hissing of that bird coming at Mach 1 out of the air. It's just that is, to me, that's an addiction.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Told podcast, brought to you in part by the awesome folks at Marshall Radio Telemetry, the makers of the most carefully engineered and reliable tracking system available. For more information on their products, check out marshallradio.com, and also the Falconry Fund. The Falconry Fund is a nonprofit organization dedicated to support and protect the various arts and practices of falconry and the cultural and environmental assets that make it possible. The Falconry Fund seeks to become a vital and effective nonprofit organization based in the U.S. to serve falconers on the North American continent and elsewhere, so that this art and practice may be pursued without undue restriction and free from current or potential threats by incompatible human activity. For more information on the Falconry Fund, head to falconryfund.org. So while still in Wyoming, one of the fortunate things that I was still able to do was connect with Vahé. He is about, probably about an hour and a half north of where I was staying in Rock Springs. And before I finished my contract up here, I was able to connect with him and check out his breeding operation and get to know him a little bit. And was really fortunate that I got to do that, being as the weather's so unpredictable and things are just kind of nuts this time of year here in Wyoming as far as just the logistics of being able to get out very much. So I really hope that you guys enjoy this conversation. It was really nice getting to meet Vahé and check his place out and see one of his birds fly while I was up there. So I will go ahead and turn things over to the conversation that I had with Vahé. So hope you all enjoy, and thank you again so much for joining us. Here we go. Yeah, so I made the about an hour and a half drive or so up today, a little bit north here in Wyoming, and figured I'd come and check out Vahé's place and, just kind of meet him for the first time, in which it is nice to meet you for the first time officially.
Thank you, likewise.
Yeah, I don't, like I said, I'm pretty sure we haven't ever met face-to-face before. I usually remember, I don't know. I've gotten the whole familiar face thing before, but how long have you been actually in this area?
Well, I started coming here in the fall of fall of 2009 or 2010. I started coming here. At the beginning, I was coming here just spending a couple of weeks hawking, and then as we got closer to the 2015 mark, I actually rent a house here in town, and I spent the entire winter here, 4.5 months, and then I was here to mid-December, went home. At the time I was in Overton, Nevada, and then I came back January 3rd, and I put an offer into buying this place.
Nice. So the property that you're on now was already existing. You didn't have to build it or anything, or?
Yeah, the house was built in 2011. Originally it was on 40 acres. And I'm very familiar with the area because I had been here for numerous years and stuff. So it just was a beautiful location that I was very partial to, and it was natural for me to just move right in.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I mentioned whenever we first talked a little while ago that, the scenery is something that as I've grown older, I've really come to appreciate. We have cornfields and rolling hills in southern Indiana, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, nothing crop-wise grows out here. It's just too cold. Sometimes the winters go down minus 43, and it's nuts. Arctic.
Whenever I was in Montana for about a month before I came down here, and when I arrived up there, it was freaking snowing. That was even in October.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, I mean, as nice as the area looks, I don't think I could do the minus 1,000 degrees, or whatever during the winter. I'm not really sure that's for me.
Yeah, this is a very unusual winter. It's been very dry. it's definitely a droughty year.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that's going to do to the game population here, but definitely will impact. But normally this time of year, we've already experienced numerous days of -30, -32.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, what do you are you hunting primarily grouse and stuff around here, or
primarily grouse? I travel and I do a little bit of sharptails and prairie chickens in other states. And the duck season here is just about a week long before the water freezes in late October.
Yeah. We kind of have that some in Indiana too. We have kind of like an extended like 1 week season or whatever before, and it happens to usually be about a week before they just start coming in mass. Know, and I mean it's. But the trade-off for this area, at least in my opinion, would just be getting to live in a super nice beautiful area year round or whatever. But like I said, I'm still not 100% sure I could do the super cold. But to each their own.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, but so I mean, where did you like live in the U.S. originally, and like how? I mean. I know you've kind of been a little bit here, there, and everywhere, with your main profession being, the abatement stuff and everything else too. But like, where did you originally live whenever you started getting into all this?
Grew up practically in Los Angeles, and my background's photography. I did about 18 years of commercial photography, doing advertising, commercial work, primarily tabletop stuff, and. LA is not necessarily a place where long winging is very well promoted sort of thing environment.
Right.
So I was traveling an hour and a half, 2 hours to, Antelope Valley just to balloon and kite birds. And after a while that got really old. And so I wanted to get out of LA. I grew up in LA, could never call it home. But in any event, falconry kind of followed me to LA. Prior to overseas when I was growing up. Basically at 7 years old is when I discovered this journey, and it's kind of
taken over.
Hole.
Taken over, and the daggers twisted. It's
it's kind of an interesting story how I got into it. My brother, who's 4 years older than me, and myself were always animal people. And I think it was a summer of, I want to say 80 or 81. We went to it was during the summertime, so we went to a public swimming pool. And on the way back, we came to this bus stop. And in the corner of this intersection was this metal freestanding juice booth. And as we're standing in line, waiting our turn to get in there, I kind of peeked through the side of the window, and the guy had this, this blender, and right next to it is this cool little bird on a wooden block. And so I kind of got my brother's attention. It was older than me, and we got to the window. As we ordered our stuff, my brother says, "Is that for sale?" We didn't even know what it was. And the guy said, yeah, the price wasn't outrageous, but it wasn't the kind of money for us to have on us, cash money. So we said to cancel our order of juice, but keep that as down payment. We'll run home, grab the money, took the bus, went home, grabbed the money, came back, paid the guy up, and he put it in a paper bag. And we took the bus, went home, and unveiled this thing. Well, later we found out it was a female Eurasian kestrel that had been kind of a misprinted bird. Basically, it fell out of the nest somehow or however they got it. But the guy apparently had cut the primary feathers in blood, and so they were all kind of. So again, not knowing what it was. Right. Now I look back at it now, go, what? That was a hell of a trauma for that bird to go through. But regardless, we had this bird. It molted 2 or 3 times before the feathers started coming in normal. They were coming in kind of curly. And so we were kids, minus the fact that we had seen very brief visuals of movie scenes like Genghis Khan running around with horseback and a big giant eagle and stuff. We had this glamorized visual of what it should have been like, but had no idea what equipment was, weight management, any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So then the only option we had was practice falconry inside the house. So, and again, the other thing was when we brought it home, it wasn't exactly welcoming for our parents. They didn't just, they just first everyone thought it was an owl because it didn't have, the tail was chopped and the wings were chopped. So it kind of was a compact, this triangular unit, But anyway, so And my parents made it very clear, hey, if you want to feed this thing, you have to provide food. Because otherwise, so little did we know that we did the best thing we could for that bird. And we were trapping English sparrows on our flat rooftop at that time. And
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah, so we'd bring this. So after a while, after it actually started flying, we'd grab these English sparrows, and my brother would hold the bird sitting on. I mean, my parents were very meticulous with the furniture. We had Italian furniture and so on. He'd be sitting on the couch, and I'd pull a few primaries from one side, and I'd like bag this bird inside of her living room. Mom was gone. And of course, this bird would come in, and it would be blood, feathers, and guts and stuff hanging from curtain rod. I mean, it was a mess. And the bird would get to eat it. Oh, ironically, that bird would cache the rest of it. And sometimes we didn't sit there and watch the whole thing. We had no idea where it was cached. So a week later, anyway, so you get the idea.
Yeah.
So mom would come home, raise hell. You can never do this. Okay, mom. Okay, mom. So basically, next time she was out, same thing. This went on for years and years. The other thing we did kind of cool was at certain times of year, there was this like 4-inch long grasshoppers that would be abundant. So we'd grab them and put the fine piece of electrical tape. I mean, what we were doing as kids was what I do in the field now with pigeons, for example, right? So we'd cut this very thin strip of electrical tape, and if I put it right over the eyes, these 4-inch long grasshoppers would just hover. And it was the most incredible thing watching this bird just come and snatch him from the air, go on top of the... Anyway, so we did this for years and years. Then there was a few years where I got detached from falconry because we were traveling. I spent a year in Pakistan, and I had a a common buzzard.
Okay.
And then I spent 2 years in India, and I had a black-shouldered kite. And then, anyway, make a long story short, May of 1988, I arrived here in the U.S., with a family, and of course I was 9th grade, and this is before internet and all that stuff, so we had no way of like finding falconers. So a few years went by, and then by now I'm in college, and I'm field trialing German short-haired pointers, and I was in a field trial in Buttonwillow, California, and in the evening it was kind of drizzling rain. We're standing, a bunch of us field trialers standing around the fire, and I overheard a conversation between two other guys, colleagues, and one said to the other, so-and-so's famous German short-haired got purchased by a falconer, and I just about spasmed. That was the first time I had heard the word falconer, right?
Yeah.
So of course I had to ask who this guy was, and they said, we don't know the name of the guy, but he's a veterinarian out of Ridgecrest, California. And that's all I had. Veterinarian out of Ridgecrest, California, falconer. So oftentimes I'd go to the Eastern Sierras fly fishing, and Ridgecrest was along the way. So one time I was driving, the following weeks, I was driving, and I would normally drive to get to Eastern Sierras to fly fish first light. Mm-hmm. And so I got to Ridgecrest, it was 4 a.m. It was 2.5 hours short of getting to Bishop or Mammoth Lakes. And anyway, I remember pulling to the first gas station, which was closed at 4 a.m., whatever it was. And there was a phone booth. This is before cell phones, of course, and there's a copy of Yellow Page hanging on a chain. Uh-huh. And I don't know what I was thinking, but instead of like going through it and finding the page, I just yanked the whole thing off the chain. Basically, I took it with me. So the following morning, after I fly fished in the morning, during noontime, I was having my lunch, sitting on not a park bench, but a campsite bench. And I came to the page where it was veterinarians out of. And anyway, so I went to a pay phone station, and I started calling. And after I think I called the third or fourth operation, they said, "Oh, that's not us. That's Jeff Novak at Rosemont Animal Hospital," or whatever it was. Mm. So I called the place, and they wouldn't put me in touch with him directly because he's a busy guy.
Sure, yeah.
So anyway, the lady said, "If you leave a number, we'll have him call you back." So I'm standing there in the cold, freezing. By this, finally he called back and he invited me. And of course, at that time, I was very well in my photography career. So my idea was that if I find falconers, I'm going to start a photo essay, a book project. So I told him about that, and he was happy to entertain it. So I went there, photographed him. He was flying chukar in the desert. And so at the end of the session, I had photographed him and stuff. I said, "Are you the only falconer in the U.S.?" He said, "No. In fact, California Hawking Club is meeting in Bakersfield at the DoubleTree in 2 weeks from now." So, of course, I went there a couple of weeks from that point, and I got out of I remember the scene when I stepped out of the car, and there were like couple hundred birds on the lawn, And I mean, from Goshawks to Kestrels to Merlins. I mean, I was like a kid in a candy store.
Sure.
So the networking started there. And of course, the following day, the Sky Trials happened on Saturday. So that was for me, that was something I had never experienced, and it really hooked my attention. And then again, talking to other people, they said, well, the Utah Sky Trials is coming up in about 3 weeks from now in February. So of course I went to that. And anyway, so my journey started with, getting a good load of eyeful of candy as far as the Sky Trials and high flying long wings and stuff, which is what really that's all I do these days. I've never flown a SIP hitters. I had in my apprentice years back in the day, I flew some, dirt hawking stuff, butails, but since then I've been just a long winger.
Cool. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, which you just answered it. Was, I mean, have you always been primarily a long wing person, or have you flown many of the other types of species? But I mean, is this, if you couldn't fly long wings, just out of curiosity? I mean, I know you've been in the long wing realm, for so long now, but I mean, was there anything else that you would rather fly if you couldn't fly long wings? Or
no, because again, I don't mean to be offensive to anyone. To each his own. Whatever rocks your world as far as falconry goes. Whatever,
you like what you like.
Yeah, exactly. But to me, anything short of long winging is like watching paint dry.
I understand.
When you stand in the cold out there and you get that grouse to flush and that falcon's coming, and he's coming and he's still coming, and it takes a good quarter mile for that grouse to be out there for that falcon to come down from 1,800 feet. And now you see this big giant explosive feather, and you just the whole thing, and the hissing of that bird coming at Mach 1 out of the air. It's just that is, to me, that's an addiction.
Yeah, no, I understand. Like, there's, I mean, predominantly where I live, we pretty much primarily have, cottontails and squirrels.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, for me personally, red tails and rabbits anymore for me is about the same, watching paint dry kind of thing. To each their own, it's whatever. I mean, the guys that I hunt with still love, there's a few of them that still love doing that primarily. If we're all out, I have no problem beating brush, for somebody else's
I'm the same
bird,
way. I mean, I love it all. It's all in the name of falconry, conservation, all that stuff. But if you said long winging was out of question, I'd say I'm quitting falconry, because that there's no other for me.
Yeah. I mean, and I get it.
And to answer that question that you just mentioned, as far as being where you are and fly what you fly, I moved because I wanted to fly what I fly. I moved out of Los Angeles because there was no game.
Right.
There's a few duck ponds, and some of them, depending on where you are, and I think things are changing because a lot of good long wingers are moving out of LA. But sometimes you show up at a pond, there's two falconry cars ahead of you, and it's just a turnoff for me. That's like disgraceful to the sport. I want to feel my shrine. I want to be one with that environment, with that falcon, with that dog. For me, it waters it down, and I don't want to experience that. To me, it's just too sacred to be.
Yeah, I totally get it. And, I totally understand for that, how that type of, mentality and approach, this area would be perfect.
Again,
it
it's
fits,
a very short season out here. On a bad year, which this year is not particularly a bad year, but on a bad year, the snow is too thick. So out here, my falconry season, if I'm staying local, starts at September 1st, grouse openers, and it will end usually by the first week of November. It's too thick. And then I travel to other places, Montana, Nebraska, Kansas, whatever it may be. But you go where you have to go if you need to, satisfy that itch.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, I've gone out west, a few times to hunt jackrabbits, and you basically, like you just summed it up. I mean, if you want to pursue a particular type of falconry and a particular type of quarry, then you don't really have a choice. There's not really much of a point in trying to do a particular type or style or whatever if you're not willing to make the extra efforts to do what you need to do to be successful doing it. Yep. So I mean, how many years total now have you been a falconer?
Well, if you consider from 7 years old now, I'm 46 now, so but I don't know if you call all those years were kind of like I would say the early years were more of a, attention grabber sort of years. But here in the U.S., I think I started in 2000 or 99.
Okay.
And wasn't until like 2005 that I really, I've ruined my life for the sport. Falconry is life pivots around falconry, and there's no other way.
Yeah.
And so 2010 is when I'm given that I was in the indoor environment doing, not artificial light photography with strobes and stuff in a concrete building day in and day out. I was kind of burned with that. And so a few years prior to that, I heard about this whole abatement thing. And so in 2010, I decided that I was going to pursue that as a full-time career, which was kind of a shocking, news to my parents. And at the time I was married and stuff. But anyway, so I closed the studio in 2010 and started Falcon Force. And it's been probably the best choice I made in my life.
Well, that's good. Yeah,
combine the two of them.
Yeah, I get it. If someone told me right now that I could maintain, my same standard of living right now doing something else other than healthcare, I'd probably make the jump in a heartbeat right now. But yeah, there's something to be said for sure for being able to kind of merge, the two things that you like to do the most and have your, life revolve around, to be able to make a living doing it. So, but yeah, so, out of curiosity then, you mentioned the sky trials and stuff before also, kind of how that was initially something that initially piqued your interest, at least here in the U.S., getting into. How many times have you participated in that?
I think I've been very active. I probably started that participating from 2006 onward, 2007 onward. And I think probably the last sky tries I flew was 2017, if I'm not mistaken. I've kind of been keeping my distance from it for a couple of years now, because there were certain things that I was not agreeing with,
right,
as far as how they were managed and what the objectives were and so on. And so things were getting diluted. So I kind of, for lack of better description, I kind of
just dropped out.
Yeah. I'm very passionate about it, but I'd love to see the scene become what it was 20 years ago, but it's unfortunately not the case.
Well, just, so describe the scene from 20, so just to give you, since this is the first time that we're meeting, and kind of talking through, I've only really, I got into the sport about 2014, 2015, so I haven't really been super involved, for but 5 or 6 years now ish. So it's always interesting for me to hear how things were, from guys that were in it, a couple decades or so ago, or even longer. What were the differences then?
I think first let me disclose something. It takes a lot of effort and energy, organization to put sky trials on.
Sure.
So I have those who organize sky trials have all of my respect. I have organized sky trials both for California sky trials and for the Las Vegas Invitational sky trials for a couple of years. But so I don't mean to knock anyone or hurt anyone's feelings by saying certain things.
Sure.
But so if I could mention a few things, that would be, as far as, in my opinion, shortcomings. Everything involves for reasons, good or bad, whatever, limitations or whatnot, resources. But the things that unfortunately have happened to the main sky trials venues is, first of all, the better participants have kind of retired and moved on, which has caused basically people entering sky trials who are not of the caliber that they were 20 years ago. So what that does is, in order to maintain a what's the right word? An event, you have to either lower the standards or reject people in order to get that core group who are okay. So let me backtrack for a second. What are sky trials, and why is it that I'm interested in sky trials? Sky trials is one event that you can get the top 15 falconers nationwide, have them fly birds, and expose the general public and or the up-and-coming falconers who would never be able to go out and watch these guys and their birds fly in one arena, fairly similar circumstances, weather changes, times of day changes, and so on. But you get to see different people's style, training style, the way they carry themselves, the way they work their dog, whatever it may be. But it's, to me, what Sky Trials did to me is the inspiration of the benchmark it kind of put on early on in my career. And I wanted to be as good as some of these guys that I was inspired by. So what's not happening now is that it has become either a moneymaker and or an event where standards have been so lowered in order to just keep it going. You know, whether it's a matter of organizers are burnt out and they're just, you know, the attention factor is not there, or it's not tailored specifically to the participants. It's tailored just for spectators. You know, at one time at the Utah Sky Trials, we'd have a tent set up with multiple vendors from all over the world that would come. And I mean, there's so many people going to the Sky Trials. They had basically an indoor facility sort of thing where you could go and look at Marshall's stuff and look at, you know, whatever it was, Mike's Falconry. I don't think they were around at that time, but so you get the idea.
Sure. Yeah.
But so, you know, it's, and you'd have 600 to 800 people sometimes at the Utah Sky Trials, at the big events, you know, but unfortunately that's not the case anymore. Again, times have changed, but the reality is that I would love to see things go back to a little bit more higher standard. Let it become an inspiration again. Let it become an upper look up to sort of thing. By lowering lowering the standards, you're bringing in crowds that are kind of proud to fly the Sky Trials by the fact that I'm flying Sky Trials, eating off of the kind of like that tier of what these people were, competitors were, you know, 2 decades ago. And unfortunately, but the quality of the birds, the quality of the falconry and the training methods are not the same. So it kind of has, that's my personal opinion. I'm nobody, of course. I'm happy to participate when I can and pull back if it's not agreeable with me. And again, I'm in no authority in any way, shape or form to.
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, like and just to, you know, clarify too, I mean, if I was to do a Sky Trials, you know, of course in a year where everything's not, you know, shut down or canceled or whatever, you know, if I decided to participate in something like that, you know, I in no way would go into it considering myself to be, you know, I mean, I know that there's just a whole metric ton of things that I don't know that the guys, you know, like yourself or, you know, been doing it for such a long time, you know, would, you know, that they know. I mean, there's a lot that I don't know that they would know.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, I know for me, if I went into it, honestly, I would approach it almost more of a, you know, learning experience than anything else. You know, it would be hard for me, you know, to go into it, I think, thinking with like a mindset of, you know, just doing it because I felt like I was just proud to be doing it, you know? But at the same time, you know, I guess it's hard for you know, like, guys in my generation or, you know, that still aren't, you know, that still are learning constantly. And I mean, you always are learning, you know, but, you know, it's hard for me to know what are some of those standards then that used to be in place. I mean, I've only brushed over like, you know, using the Utah Sky Trial rules and stuff, for example, like, you know, the different criteria that your bird has to meet. And so, I mean, how have those the criteria changed?
So
then?
like my background, I shouldn't say my background, but I've done field trialing pointers. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the way that scene is operated, you have like qualifications, and then those who you have to get so many qualifications in order to go to the nationals, for example. You cannot just show up and say, I'm going to run my dog in the nationals. So with that said, I'm not saying we're the same number of people. We're not, you know, our sport is much, much smaller.
Sure.
But like back in the day, if you were a falconer and the big boys were competing, you'd be intimidating going out there, cutting your bird. I'm not saying this from like a very, just take it from a humble point of view.
Sure.
But you'd be intimidated going out there, cutting your bird loose with that many eyes watching, and or standing, rubbing shoulders against the big boys, because you had to meet, for example, an 800-foot pitch. Okay,
like
that 800-foot
yeah.
pitch, unfortunately, at the Utah Sky Trials is brought down for the last 2 or 3 years to 300 feet.
Oh, is it 300?
300 feet.
Okay.
600 was like the benchmark, but they couldn't meet 600-foot pitches, more than 1 or 2 falconers per event. So they lowered it to 300 just to bring in more people.
Right.
It's so anyone practically could fly a bird at a 300-foot pitch. So, but it dilutes down that visual where you look at that, go, shit, this is like an event. This is what I want to be.
Right.
What is this guy doing? How is he training birds that are taking a pitch of 1,800 feet and just rocking it? So that's what I'm talking about. With the Marshall Telemetry, a GPS unit, for example, things are now factual information. Back in the days, we had a guy with 2 or 3 guys with laser rangefinders. You had a guy who had an angled, anglometer. So they would divide the angle. So there were all these mathematical equations, and then a lot of it was then at the judge's discretion at the end of the equation. You know what I'm saying? Now you have very set information of where your bird is and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So we have great technology, but it's not, unfortunately, often applied to making the event superior to the previous year.
Right. No, I understand that. I just, like I said, it's, so, out of curiosity then, most of the guys that participate, did they have birds almost exclusively that they kept more or less for sky trial purposes, and then, separate from their hunting birds?
No, back in the days, just about everyone who participated was a game hawker. But there was more opportunities available for people to fly. A lot of California guys, for example, back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of falconers would come from California. A huge force of sky trials falconers would come out of California. In fact, they had this song that they would sing, all the California guys, to intimidate the Utah guys. It was this rivalry and stuff. It was a very cool visual. There was like competition, but friendly at the same time. We were all friends at the end of the day. But because of certain types of limitations and lifestyles, people wanted to see the best in their falcons. And it's still the case probably now. But what I'm not seeing, and of course back then we were ballooning, we were kiting, so nowadays everyone's practically droning.
Yeah.
Because helium is like $400 at 219
crazy expensive,
Yeah, I'm still doing helium and stuff, but regardless. We have more technology now between knowing where the bird is, how high that bird is. We have drones, we have all these really cool stuff. Your bird gets the bait, you push a button, that drone parks on top of your car while you're out there getting your bird that's coming down. There's a lot of things that we have, cool things that we have, but I think it's made people lazy. People are no longer hungry about that, pushing the limits to the far ends of the spectrum.
Sure. Well, and just in my ultra super narrow, limited experience with bigger long wings, and just getting a long wing going, at least just from what my experience is, and it could be completely wrong. I don't have a wide enough experience base yet with it, but there's so many extra little quirks and steps to get a long wing going. I think that not only, is it, a situation even as much like a hunger type thing, but you have to have that much more drive and that much more.
It has to wake you up in the morning.
Yeah, you really have to want
out
to
here,
fly long wings.
Out here in the morning, sometimes it's, minus 22 and my fingers are blue.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to put the whole balloon rig together out there.
Yeah.
And I jump in the guard, warm my hands, go back out there. But, I'm not saying it's the only way of training, but it's produced results for me, so I stick to it.
Yeah.
And again, there's a lot of falconers out there, all of incredible, but I think they've gotten turned off to the sky trials thing because of how it's kind of been diluted down. And those who are really good falconers now, they just don't care for it. Where at one point they were all like there was like one event where you could really like see who's flying what, and I mean, in a very positive way. And the competition and stuff is all beautiful, but you get to see who does what and how they do it, and ask questions and see how the back of their car looks like, how they're rigged up, how their dogs are. Just the whole thing is very, to me, it's a totally inspirational venue. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I can understand if it's, you know, I mean, like you said, times change, and you know the way things evolve. Sometimes, you know, sometimes it evolves to not be someone's certain cup of tea anymore. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, you know, I mean, with the way things are, I mean, sometimes you have to adapt certain things, you know, to keep it going, or sometimes it just dies, you know, too. So,
absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
But yeah, so, well, I mean, so how did you place? I mean, how did you do in the times that you know, competed in those then? I mean,
I've done good. I mean, I've again, the idea is not to necessarily win for me. It's just to you know, go out there and see who else does what. And
oh yeah, I meant more like, you know, what was the best pitch that you ended up getting? Like,
I mean, I've had, I think this is kind of bragging. I don't need to do this.
Oh no, I'm just curious because, like I said, I mean,
I mean, one year I think at the California Hawking Club meeting, I think it was 2012. I entered 2 birds, and I think one bird was at 1,680 feet, but after he stooped the pigeon put underneath the car, I could not get the bird to come down. So I kind of took 3rd place with that bird because I went into overtime, and I remember throwing this dead carcass, and the bird just wanted that pigeon so bad, wouldn't come down. So then the bird that my second bird flew, I think he took 1,288 feet. He took 1st place, and he feathered the pigeon and so on. And so there's all these, you know, all these things. It's just it doesn't apply to one item and one way of winning. But anyway, just yeah.
Oh, what I mean, what exact? I mean, were you flying hybrids? Were you flying?
I've always flown hybrids. I think in 2006 I pulled a female peregrine out of Arizona, wild-taken bird.
Okay.
And that was my only pure peregrine that I have flown as far as game hawk and or sky trials bird. In fact, I never flew that bird. That was like my entry to like really getting the birds to fly high sort of thing.
Okay.
And then from the following year onward, it's been hybrids for me all the way.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, do you prefer mainly gyr peregrines or?
Primarily gyr peregrines. Yeah. I'm not, you know, there's subtleties in subspecies of peregrines in the gyr. So I go through 2 or 3 birds a year. This year, unfortunately, I started with 3 birds. I'm down to 1. One just didn't have what I wanted to see in a bird. One got killed by a golden eagle 3 or 4 weeks ago. Yeah. And then I've got 1 bird today, probably after this, we'll go fly this bird for the last time. The USI Sky Trials got canceled this year. Not that I was going to go, but that was kind of something I was looking up to maybe.
Right.
But we'll make the last flight. This is mid-January now. I don't need to push him any harder. This year, the jackrabbit population here in Wyoming is very low. With that said, the eagles are down here and they are looking for opportunities to feed, and anything that moves, you know, is fair game. Yeah. I mean, I've seen them take adult antelope out there.
Wow.
Very graphic visuals of, you know, one particular female, 2017, was still standing on, you know, 4 hoofs. And while it was standing, female eagle was on its back, eating off of the side.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was like really weird, you know, horrific sort of visual, but they have to survive.
Yeah.
And if jackrabbits are not out there, they're looking for, you know, just about anything.
Yeah, I mean their world is a lot more brutal.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And bald eagles are just as, in fact, baldies in my opinion are faster flyers. You normally, when someone says bald eagle, my visual is either canoeing on a lake and a baldie takes a trout and flies off, and or you turn the corner and there's a roadkill and there's 2 baldies sitting on it. But watching a bald eagle fly down a gyr peregrine hybrid at the physical condition of ballooning and kiting 4,500 feet on daily basis is kind of like watching a gyr peregrine falcon at the Sky Trials served a racing homer. I mean, the flight style is basically just until they are mentally defeated, and or if they can escape, they do. But so oftentimes they'll be mentally defeated and they just snatch them on the ground.
That's a hell of a visual.
Yeah, my God, it's not a good visual at all. Yeah,
I was going to say that's one of those visuals that would make you pucker for sure. If
Oh
you're
my
the one,
God.
if it's your bird and you're sitting there watching it happen, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you were, I mean, just hypothetically though, if you were watching something like that, I mean, if you were just in the perfect right place at right time to see that happen with like a wild bald eagle in a wild, you know, say like a peregrine or something, just for whatever circumstances caused it to happen, I can see where it would be pretty neat to watch then. But man,
Yeah, I mean,
know.
the sad thing is that you're standing on the ground, and oftentimes when this last one I had, unfortunate case, but basically I was ballooning the bird, and the bird was about 1,700 feet and climbing, and all of a sudden this eagle comes and is able to climb up there, and then once the gyr peregrine becomes level with it, they have to escape. Now that they're at a danger. So, of course, here I am down on the ground swinging a lure and, trying to bird just come at my feet. Of course, that's not the case because they're so, freaked out with the whole thing.
Right.
And there's not much you could do. You just stand there and just.
Well, yeah. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter what the circumstance is.
Yeah.
As soon as that bird leaves the fist, you're powerless,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Man, boy, that's a visual I'm probably going to think about for a little bit. Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
That's nuts. But okay, so I mean, we've kind of talked about, your intro, your sky trials experiences. And you mentioned earlier, about your abatement company. I mean, what happened along your path kind of to make you decide, okay, this photography stuff, being in this room for, days at a time, whatever, it sucks, it's not for me, I'm going to transition into abatement. And how did you go about doing that? I mean,
I think in 2010, at that point, that was my last year that I was full-time photographer. And basically, I think I had a bad experience with an art director I was photographing for an advertising agency in LA, and I was assigned this young art director, and who I was hired for a specific reason. My style of photography was what they hired for. And the entire evening I was photographing with this girl, she tried to art direct away from what I was hired for in the first place, to the point where I photographed it. And back then I was basically photographing 4x5 view cameras. And of course we'd shoot Polaroids as test sort of shots, black and white Polaroids, and we'd turn it over, art director would sign the back of it. So I had her sign it off she went. And I think we finished the shoot at about 8 p.m. Well, I made the photograph the way it should have been shot. And I was up until 1 or 2 a.m. So the following day, film was processed. I went to the agency, I laid it down, and of course they all gathered and they were looking at the photography that she had approved. And then on the far end of the light box, back then, this is analog, right? Far end of the light box, I put the 4 pieces of transparencies that I shot the way it should have been shot. And pretty soon, the senior art director kind of glanced back and forth, and what's this? Oh, I'm glad you shot variations. I said, no, this is not a variation. It's on my time. And this is a separate shot. If you want to buy it, it's going to be a full, day rate. Anyway, make a long story short, I realized that the creative mind needs space to thrive. You cannot choke it and expect for it to produce good work, basically. So that was kind of a big slap in the face for me. Make a long story short, so I was this opportunity came where I picked up we were talking about this earlier. For some reason, 2010, you could buy Tears of Peregrines for $400 to $600. So I picked up 2 Tears of Peregrines that I was specifically tailoring for abatement work. And shortly after, I started working for Tom Savory, doing a vineyard in Central California. And then the following year, I did work for, I think, Jeremy Roselle for a short period of time. And then the third year, I had my own contracts because I'd meet neighboring farmers and so on. So I do blueberries, cherries, wine grapes. And then we do a bunch of industrial stuff, from refineries to hotels, resorts. Not necessarily, that's hospitality, but all sorts of stuff, marinas, you name it. Amusement parks, like SeaWorld's been a contract of mine now for about 7 or 8 years. So it's kind of just broadened up. And looking back, I question why I stayed in photography for as long. Don't get me wrong, I'm passionate about photography to this day, but never once doing the abatement work, it feels like I'm working.
Well, I mean, do you think it was more just because that's what your security, was at the time?
The photography part, you mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a degree in photography, so I went to private college. But things just, we live and we learn. We move on. Nothing is permanent. That's one thing, that's for sure. And it was a journey that I followed. And at the beginning, it was kind of a joke. My parents would even look at me, you quit that for this,
right?
Playing with birds. How long are you going to play with birds? So then they realized, no, this is a real thing. Now I had employees, I had multiple contracts. Now we're spread between 8 states. And so it's just, it's been a great journey.
Yeah, no, I bet. I mean, and I totally understand what you meant too about the whole, creativity needs room, to grow and thrive, or else,
absolutely,
you end up just hating yourself. I totly get it. I mean, like I said, I've been a musician since I was 14, and initially went to school and stuff to do all this audio, crap.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's I think probably that's still a big reason to this day. Why I haven't made a switch from something else. So I mean, it's just you get used to a certain income and a certain
comfort zone.
Comfort zone. And like I said, if I knew for sure that I could make a decent amount of money doing something else, at this point I'd probably give it a shot, just because just the way this last year's been, especially for healthcare. But I mean, I'm always interested to talk to friends and other acquaintances and stuff that have branched into abatement, because it seems like, I don't know, the way they've accumulated those experiences, contracts, and kind of grown into it a little bit. It's kind of always been a little bit of the same, but yet different. So, I mean, I wasn't really sure. I mean, how hard is it, to get some of those contracts and stuff that you've gotten, and get to do that?
So it's just like any other industry. Not every plumber is the same.
Right.
You got people that you would trust So anyway, it's the same way. So at the beginning, when I would do a contract, oftentimes, this one particular contract I did, 4 other falconers had done it. So they gave me basically very little room. They said, okay, we're going to try this for 2 weeks, because I had to convince them that I could do it. It was a blueberry farm. And they said, okay, just 2 weeks, just a trial and error sort of thing, because we don't want to spend any more money. We know it doesn't work. So at the end of 2 weeks, the head CEO of the farm, who was the son of one of the sons, came up to me and says, can you extend for another week? So we extended. Then he came back and said, can you extend for 1 more week? And by then, he was overlapping my grape contract that I had in California. So I had to, unfortunately, tell him that, and that was the end of it. Well, the following year, they called back and said, we'll only do it if you personally will do it. We don't want you to put anyone on this contract. We want no one but you. That's a very common thing. Because for me, at the end of the day, it's not about how much money I make. For me, it's a job that needs to be done. And I love to process. I love to get the job done at any cost. I mean, I'm
ruthless.
Yeah. Falconry itself is not enough. Sometimes you need pyrotechnics. Sometimes you need this and that, and all sorts of really other aspects that play into it. But just being creative and being open-minded about what else can I do.
So you've primarily focused mainly on like the ag, type stuff.
If I'm taking a contract, unless I open a new contract and it's a large enough contract that I see the value of me being there, basically starting it for a few weeks. Like SeaWorld, we started the first 5 months. I did it myself, along with Becca, who was at the time my girlfriend. And then we handed over to multiple different people who came in, and we kind of worked with them. And when we were comfortable, we kind of camped it out. But unless it is that, and I'm starting a new contract, I'll train somebody. Outside of that, the only work that I personally do is basically ag work. Because I love being in an environment where, vineyard environment, you got beautiful, open, clean air, and it's just quiet. And I'm.
Yeah, you're just kind of me, myself, and I.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And basically, practically, you start that car at crack of dawn. You weigh your birds, load them in the car, and that car is idling from sunup to sundown, sometimes for 16 hours. Why? Because it's sometimes 110 degrees, and
your birds to
you have birds inside on the back seat is being converted. So you live out of that car. Every 3 years, I go through these Toyota Tacomas, and oftentimes when I bring it to my friend who's a mechanic, he laughs at me. We can't sell this thing. Smells like smells like the sewer. Well, I live out of it. Imagine not changing your shirt for 5 months. You know what I'm saying? Because the seat covers basically absorb and then you have birds. Basically, it's a muse on wheels. It's a bedroom, an office, a living room where you eat your food. So just imagine. I mean, it's a full-time gig that is very rewarding for me. I love it. I mean, it's one aspect of abatement that I really miss, and when I get a chance, I like doing it myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if there was a particular type, how do I want to word this? There's a particular type of abatement that you think needs done across the board, pretty much, no matter what. I mean, what type do you think it would be? I mean, what do you see as like the biggest problem? Consistently.
Biggest problem is probably agricultural goods, blueberries, cherries, wine grapes. Honeycrisp apples get also hit pretty hard because they're thin-skinned, but there's really no way around it. Blueberries nowadays, sometimes they do it in sort of a larger scale greenhouse type of thing, where they're in these hoops, and it's a microclimate of its own, and hardly ever birds go inside of it, unless it's just a front end and so on. But as far as like wine grapes, how do you manage 2,000 acre vineyard? You could net things. So just to put things into perspective, it takes 400, and I've talked to multiple grape farmers about this and come to this conclusion, but it takes $400 an acre to buy the netting material that traditionally they would drape over wine grapes, and they clip it at the bottom. Just $400 an acre, cost of the material, the labor to put it on, and the labor to peel it off before harvest. Okay, so if you have a 1,000-acre vineyard, that's $400,000 worth of abatement. Now, there's a problem with that. Oftentimes, when they stretch that quarter mesh, plastic nylon mesh, over the vines, it's pressed against the fruit. So starlings will bind to this netting and eat right through it. Yeah. Anything that's on the surface will get eaten just as hard, right? So you're losing about 25 to 40% of your crops, depending on size of the vineyard. So with us coming in there, we can do the same acreage for about $70,000, for example. So once it's hard to convince a farmer that this can be done and not have them net the product,
right?
Because the entire year they're working hard for the 4-month period of veraison, and you're convincing them to basically walk out with no pants on, basically, right? but once you convince them, it's not a matter of can it be done. It's a matter of we need you to do it. We need so and so. We liked him. We want him back. So it's a very rewarding experience to sell that product and then stand behind it like that.
I bet. I mean, I can see though once they're sold on it. I mean, just my Indiana math, tell me that that's a huge amount of money that you're saving yourself. If you can, that's a huge amount.
Yeah. But see, the problem is there's guys who are not. So agricultural bird abatement is basically a function of long winging. You can have oplomatos maybe, which are long wings, but they kind of fly in the style of a Harris hawk, more or less, off the fist, come back, Yeah. But primarily you're managing that with barberries, Tirso barberries, Tirso peregrines, Tirso red-naped shaheens, and crosses of prairies maybe. So to find those good falconers who are confident long wingers in the first place, managing 6 to 8 birds of their own and living out of their truck and stuff. First of all, that gene pool is very small.
Right.
And so it's the hardest part of this, the growth part, is finding those individuals who are either single or they're insane. They love it so much that they can't get, you know what I'm saying? You get
or
the
if they're
idea.
not single yet, they will be.
Well, that too.
Yeah, just obsessed enough that you're
living off the road in a trailer most of the times. So there's a lot of things. But to me, it's like, I love to hunt. It's kind of like going to grouse camp. I show up, I set up camp. I've got my weathering yard. My dogs are there to protect the birds when I'm not there. So it's kind of a very I love it. I mean, it's like a glamorous environment for me, and I kind of miss it when I'm,
Yeah, no, I can understand. I mean, there's like I said, it's just like anything else too. I'm sure where, it's not for everyone and to each their own.
Not for everyone.
But for some reason, I mean, I can understand though, if you just have that experience that's the final, like the final straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. It's like, I'm not going to work for anybody else anymore. I want to do this because I know it's going to, nothing else. It's like, well, I'm going to do this at least to give it a shot. I mean, worst case scenario, I can always go back to photography or go back to whatever.
Not an option for me.
Yeah.
See, the thing is that what people don't realize is when you pick up a contract and when someone is assigned a contract, whether it's a 12-week contract, 14-week contract, 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
That means for 12 or 14 weeks, at 12 hours a day, you don't have a day off.
Yeah.
You don't have a weekend. I mean, you are grinding it.
Yeah.
But of course, there's big money to be made in a short period of time. You can meet your quota in a matter of a 5-month period, and then you can hawk the rest of the season, for the most part.
Sure.
But it can be mentally devastating not having enough time to run to the laundry when you're that far behind, or have to do invoicing when you're on the job site, whatever it may be. But just it's a grind and a half. But it's a beautiful thing if your heart's into it.
Yeah. I think if it was me, I'd have to have a camper or something of some kind. Or at least be able to escape, to have a shower at least once a week or something.
Yeah. See, I've had campers. I had an Airstream, and I had an RPod and stuff, but that doesn't cut it for me. I want to be able to. The camper life is beautiful because you're right there on site. But oftentimes, I sold both of the campers now. Oftentimes what I'll do is either be camping out of a motel room, or I'll rent a house in the vicinity, which means at the end of the day, I can stretch. I have a hot shower. I have internet, all those things.
It sounds a lot more appealing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's been really cool, getting to talk to you and to see your place here for the first time. I mean, just real quick before we finish up, we ask this question a lot commonly too. I mean, just out of curiosity, what was your, I guess either you can pick from either hunting or sky trial experience, whatever you prefer. That one, almost every hunter has like that, or falconer has, either or has that one experience that they remember that sticks out as like their favorite hunting experience, favorite bird, whatever the case may be. What's that for you? I mean, do you have like a single one that sticks out, like a single story?
We all do, I guess. I mean, there's many memories that I can think of, but the one that probably oftentimes visits me when I shut my eyes in the evenings or stare at the ceiling falling asleep is a flight I had here in Wyoming with a friend of mine. I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, maybe. But I had that Fijian Macropus bird wraith that has been one of my key birds in the sky trial scene as well. And we flew. We had a beautiful point, doggone point and stuff. Anyway, this big giant boomer takes off, and that bird was. This is before Marshall, I think, at that point. But he was high. He was very high. But he came down and hit that bird. And, a cock sage grouse could be, 4,200 grams or more. And he cartwheeled that bird out of the air. And when I went there to pick up the bird, he was casually sitting on this bird. But when I picked up the bird after he was fed, both wings were broken at the base. I mean, he must have. And to this day, the one phenomenon that I can't wrap my head around is how is it that two birds, meaning they're made out of hollow bones and feathers and some muscle tissue on top,
hit that damn
can
hard.
collide together, and like one shatters and the other one. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've had deer peregrines hit a drake mallard, and this particular bird, Ace, he shattered his tarsus into six pieces. He was in a cast for about 6 weeks and healed just fine. In fact, became the 9-pound hammer, and he's killed numerous grouse. I sold him last 2 years ago. But regardless, I mean, that happens a lot. But how is it that level of kinetic energy destroys one and the other one survives?
Yeah. Well, because they they keep going through it. It's just kind of like martial arts, breaking boards or bricks or whatever. It's kind of the same deal. I mean, it's as long as you keep driving through it.
Yeah.
Most of the time, you're not going to break your hand.
Yeah, and then it's just a matter of, I guess, how they hit it and how skid across.
It's got to be the right
whatnot.
angle and stuff too. It is amazing, especially just how loud that hit is.
Oh yeah, I mean the more amazing thing is like a gyroparrot. That particular bird's like a 720 gram bird, and that cockbird was probably 4,800 grams, 4,200 grams in that neighborhood. So the size difference. It's like a high school boy going to a bar and like trying to get pick a fight with a bouncer that's like 300 pounds, 6 feet tall, broad shoulders.
Right. Yeah. It's not usually a good idea. But no, I feel you. No, that's cool, man. Like I said, it's always a pleasure kind of getting to know people for the first time, and some of the favorite podcasts that I've done have been with people that I've actually just met and gotten to know for the first time, and actually the first real sit down conversation I really gotten to have was during the podcast. Yeah. So I mean, it's always cool. It kind of changes things up for me a little bit and stuff too, and we're always appreciative of the time that other fellow Falconers are willing to give and everything. I'm looking forward to seeing your bird fly here a bit too, and like I said, thanks again so much for taking the time on a Monday afternoon.
Yeah, my pleasure. You guys are doing an incredible program here. I've listened to some of them, unfortunately not all of them, but when I'm driving, sometimes going California here, 17-hour drive, I'll go through a couple of them, three of them. But it's really nice to hear from people and what they're doing and how people experiences and stuff. Those are memories that.
It's always neat hearing what makes other people tick.
And generally speaking, falconers are not the most social species to begin with, right? So to hear their stories without stepping on anyone's toes and stuff, but positives and so on.
We're a unique and sensitive breed at times.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But anyway, let's get ready to head out here shortly. And like I said, thank you again, and I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Talk again soon.
Thank you.